Hi, welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and thanks for watching. Well, the Chancellor of the State System of Higher Education is in our studio for a special interview. And then Pete DeCoursey joins us, a little legislative update, all of that after these words.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Welcome back to the program. Well, before I begin, I want to point out, I want to thank our viewers around the state for continuing to watch the program, and to our viewers in South Central Pennsylvania on WGAL. We're #1 in our time spot. And don't tell Chris Matthews, who follow us, we tied him. But it's all due to you and to great guests like the one we have today. Again, as always, thanks for watching. Here we go. John Cavanaugh, the new Chancellor of the State System of Higher Education, welcome.
Thank you. It's a privilege to be here.
No, we're honored to have you here. Oh, okay, Chancellor, let's get down to the hard questions. All right. First of all, you've got a variety of experiences. You went to St. Joe University. You know, Pennsylvanians will love that. And then you went to neighboring, worked at the University of Delaware.
Right.
What do you think are some of the more important experiences that you bring to this job? I want to talk about your job in a minute, but tell us a little bit about yourself.
I think in terms of the experiences, Terry, what I bring is a background in institutions that are very similar to the universities that are in the system, institutions that really cater to and reach out to first-generation college students. Right. Students are coming from families of modest economic means whose parents didn't have an opportunity to go to college. And so those are the kinds of students that we really want to serve. And because that represents the future of the economy of the Commonwealth and of the country, actually. Yeah. And to make sure that we're providing the best opportunity possible for those that would desire to go to university to have that chance.
And one of the things about the state system, if I recall this correctly, is a huge number of students remain in the state. We have this so-called brain drain problem. Well,
that's right.
A large number of students remain here and work in their communities.
That's right. In fact, it's a majority of our graduates that stay in the Commonwealth, which if you look at it as in terms of investment, the return on that, because we are the state-owned universities, the fact that they then stay and become contributing members of the Commonwealth society, that's really an important statistic.
Yeah. Well, I think the first question that, a lot of people want to know, obviously you're here, you run this, this big system that sprawls across the whole state. Have you set any sort of personal goals? I know you have a board. Everybody has to report to someone.
That's right.
What are kind of the goals as you went through the process to become the new chancellor? I'm sure you thought about it. What do you think are some of the broad brush goals that the citizens of our state would be interested in hearing?
Sure. I think first and foremost, to go back to some of the things we were talking about earlier, to make sure that the state system is the best value in higher education in the Commonwealth. We've done a good job at that so far. We can continue to improve. Second, I want to make sure that the academic programs that we offer in the system are those that are the ones that will set up our graduates to be productive and successful in the 21st century global economy. That's really important. Right. And that means that we need to bear in mind that we are in a global economy and we're in a global marketplace even in higher education. So we need to be able to offer our students the opportunity to interact with students from around the world and to give them the opportunity to go and get that experience themselves. I think we need to continue to attract and retain the top talent on the faculty and staff. We've done a good job. We need to keep doing that good job as the competition stiffens up. I think overall we want to make sure that the state system remains not only the best value but the best education in the Commonwealth.
Yeah, does that mean instituting, one of the things that obviously you're going to have to consider is you look at all the schools, they have strengths and weaknesses, and everybody, we don't have to talk about the weaknesses.
Right.
We'll just stick to the strengths for the moment. But they all have different missions, so to speak. Do you view your job as trying to help them strengthen those missions, or do you think that you're going to be a big change guy or a slow change guy? Maybe that's one of the
I think if you look across the system, at the general level, the missions are pretty similar. Where you see the differences is when you go down to a lower level and look specifically at the academic programs each university has. One of the tricks in pulling together a system is to make sure that there's availability of the most important programs across the Commonwealth. But in some of those specialized areas that match up well with the industry or the businesses in that particular part of the state, then you want to align those programs.
Yeah.
So you can look at it as a set of overlapping circles.
Yeah, that's a good way to, we're going to go to a break, but the one thing that always struck me is most of the students in the state system come from their region. They may not be able to afford to go somewhere else.
They may be place-bound.
Yeah. So that's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
So what that means is that you got to have a core liberal arts program at general ed courses at every one of the schools. So if you have to remain there, you can get a quality. I mean, is that your big point? And then they'll add on to.
And then they'll add on, and then we can also do a better job. We have done some cooperative programs. If we can do a better job in taking advantage of the fact that there are 14 universities in the system, and making those different programs more readily accessible to students, I think is a good idea as well.
All right, we're talking with the new Chancellor of the State System of Higher Education, John Cavanaugh. We'll be back in a moment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Pennsylvania Medical Society, doctors and patients, preserve the relationship. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association, business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Hi, welcome back to the program with Chancellor Cavanaugh of the State System of Higher Education. Chancellor, look, one of the activities that the state system has to engage in, you have to deal with the legislature. You're wholly owned subsidiary of state government. I got that about right?
Yeah.
And that creates a special relationship. How do you view that relationship? Have you thought much about that? I mean, we have a complicated higher ed system in the state. We have the so-called state-related, Penn State, Pitt, Temple, and Lincoln, and then we have 125 or so private colleges. This is a pretty complex system.
It is. It is. And I think, the relationship that our system needs to have with the legislature needs to be very close. And I've already had the opportunity to meet with several of the key legislators. Of course, there are members of the legislature on our board.
Right.
And I think it's very important for us to continue that dialogue and for me to continue meeting key people in the legislature, leadership, committee chairs, and so on. And I'm going to do that over the course of the fall. It's important that they understand what we're all about and that we understand what their interests and goals for the system are as well.
Now, on the issue of funding, it's always not controversial. I mean, everybody goes before the legislature. And have you thought about, I mean, is your general impression that the system is underfunded, it needs more help legislatively? I mean, the tuition hikes, there's a relationship between what you all charge the students on the one hand and what the legislature does on the other. Have you given some thought to the historic tuition patterns yet?
Yeah, and I think one of the important things that you talked about is the linkage between the state support and tuition. I think the state system has done a phenomenal job at holding down tuition increases and to provide the best value. And one of the things that we want to make sure that the legislature understands is that return on investment.
Yeah.
When the state and the taxpayers invest in us, what are they getting for that investment? And that's why it's so very important for us to have those good communication links with the legislature so that we can report back to the citizens that support us.
I mean, I always thought, I could be wrong. I mean, obviously we want low tuitions because we know that there's a certain number of folks who just simply can't afford it and don't want to borrow the money to get there. There are other considerations, I think you would agree, as to why people go to college or don't go to college, and some should be there perhaps and some shouldn't. But the bigger point I'm trying to make is that even and the tuition is what, about $6,000 or something in that range? Okay. Yeah. All right, so let's say $6,000. I mean, that seems like a lot, but $6,000, you could get a college education at one of your schools for the price of a medium, just tuition now, of a medium price car today. Now, when I think about it, when I see young people, I talk with, well, they're going to go get a job and buy a car. A lot of young people want a new car. I'm thinking, well, you could get a college education. But I'm sure that's kind of a crazy way to think about it now.
It's not so crazy. I think you need to put it in perspective like that. And then when you ask the further question, what do you get for that medium price car? I mean, the quality of education we have in the system is truly first rate.
Yeah. And the other thing is that if you now look at the income difference, the lifetime income
difference
differences
That's right.
between those who have a... And again, I want to make a point here. We're not saying that everybody has to go to college. That's not the point we're trying to make, and I think you would agree.
That's right.
It's not for everyone. But for those who
do.
Right.
What?
Go
for
ahead.
those who do.
For those who do.
When you think about the investment, let's say if you want to round it off at $6,000,
Yeah.
$25,000, what you get then for the rest of your life, not just in terms of dollars, but in the knowledge and the wisdom that you gain through that educational experience. What a return.
Yeah, I mean, it's not even what you're making the point as given your field of interest, right? Your academic field of interest.
Right.
What we're talking about here is not just money, but the other satisfactions that you would get out of life, right?
That's right.
All right. Well, let's. I want to turn to another topic, and it's an important topic, and it's one I sort of saved for last, and that is the college, the universities, and economic development.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody knows that whether it's a Mansfield or a Clarion or a Lock Haven, tend to be the largest employers in the areas in which they live. Just as many small colleges. Now, I'm at Franklin and Marshall. We're in a larger city. We have other big employers, but many colleges and universities are in small towns that are in dire need of economic development and community assistance. What is your sense, and by the way, we have a governor, as everybody knows, who's put more money into that than any other governor in the state's history. So what is your sense about what you think your universities can do to assist in economic and community development?
Well, if you start from the premise that it's an investment of the state that creates us in the first place, then we have an obligation to engage in economic development broadly described, whether it's in Westchester or Mansfield or wherever that is, particularly in those smaller communities. We need to be working in close partnership with the chambers of commerce and the local elected officials and all, and developing a strategy in common for the betterment of that particular area. Some of that may also engage conversations at the state level with more flexible approaches to public-private partnerships, wherever those conversations may need to lead. But it's especially important in those smaller communities that you were talking about that we look for creative, new, innovative ways to partner together, because that not only can help the local community, but to get back to the point you made earlier, help keep our graduates at home.
Yeah, we're going to go to a break, but I've always thought, economic community development colleges are the big engines of that. Look at the resources that exist on in the faculty with, in economic and business administration and nurse. I mean, there's so many ways that they can contribute, particularly in those areas of slow growth in our state, and they're fairly plentiful. We're talking with the Chancellor of the State System of Higher Education, and we'll be back following these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by Pennsylvania Credit Union Association. Pennsylvania Credit Unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, check out ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the State System of Higher Education. 14 state-owned universities. The state system is the largest provider of higher education in Pennsylvania. And by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, working towards a healthy Pennsylvania.
Hi, welcome back to the program of the new Chancellor of the State System of Higher Education. Hey, on a personal level, have you gotten, what do you think of, I'm going to really put you on, what do you think of central Pennsylvania? You're living here now and you're getting around. What do you think?
It's absolutely great. When I was growing up in Wilmington, my family used to come up to the Lancaster area quite a bit, and my wife grew up in the Washington area, and she's actually fished Penns Creek and all years ago. So in many respects, it's very, very familiar country to us, and it's just gorgeous.
Yeah. I'll tell you this is really a stunning state. I mean, the economic growth, and once you get out west of the Susquehanna River, with some, obvious exceptions, is not really great, but you just travel through the state. I mean, you go to the Laurel Valley, you go up into the Mansfield and up off Route 80. I mean, we have a stunningly gorgeous state that the governor and the legislature and been debating about economic development and how to do it and what to do with things that we just talked about how colleges and universities ought to be helpful and what we have to do to kind of retain people in the state. And part of the nexus, Chancellor, is that we can educate them, right? We can help educate them, but we can't find the jobs. And unless we have the jobs for them, that's my point about economic development.
Right. And that's why economic development is so important. On Monday, was up at Lock Haven and met the mayor, and we were talking very specifically about that relationship between the city and the community of Lock Haven and the university, and how inextricably linked those two are. And whatever we can do to help foster economic development in whether it's Lock Haven or, as we talked before, about Mansfield and Edinburgh and Clarion and the rest of those institutions along I-80, since we were talking about that part of the state. It is a beautiful part of the country, and it is a place that there's a lot to take advantage of to attract industry and business.
Well, you know, what we call town gown, meaning the relationship between a college university and a college community, often has its high points and its low points. I mean, mostly when the students, students are students, and, we've been living with that problem for 150 years. In general, do you find that most of these town gown relationships are okay, and is that...
Yeah, I think it really comes back again to the communication. The university and the city and community have got to be talking to each other.
Sure.
And nobody wants a lot of problems and speed bumps, if you want to put it that way. And I think the student governments have been good at reaching out to those groups and just keeping the dialogue going, and everybody working together, and students working among themselves to keep problems to a minimum.
Yeah. Well, look, I want to thank you for coming on, and as things happen during the year, you all come back and fill us in on what's going on. All right, coming up, Pete DeCoursey from Capitolwire. We're going to find out, get a little legislative update. Well, now, the legislature's not around right now, but there's a lot of stuff percolating in the background. We'll talk about that with Pete after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Highmark Blue Shield, changing the way health plans work for business with a variety of plan options for employers and more choices for employees. Information is available at highmark.com. Have a greater hand in your company's health. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, the future of long-term care. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Penn Future, where we believe that every environmental victory grows the economy, and by the Pennsylvania Cyber Charter School, bringing educational innovation and freedom to the children of Pennsylvania.
Hi, welcome back to the program. Joining me as often is the case is Pete DeCoursey, one of Harrisburg's leading reporters, top reporters. He's with Capitolwire.com. Right, Peter?
Yep.
All right, look, the big news, of course, lately is more and more Democrats are calling for Bill DeWeese, the majority leader in the State House, to step down as majority leader. Some have said he shouldn't even be running. But let's talk about this. The latest is Frank Dermody, a legislator from
the Pittsburgh area, the Pittsburgh suburbs in Allegheny County, which has become the epicenter of the DeWeese must go movement in the House Democrats, because that area was the area that you'll remember was the biggest anti-pay raise area, where a lot of people lost their seats because of the pay raise, and now it is becoming, I think, because KDKA, the radio station out there, which dominates the market, has made a big issue of this and keeps pressing. And Dermody has been rumored to be about to do this for about 3 months. And finally came out to the Pittsburgh Tribune-Review and said he must go, and became the first really of the silent majority of the guys who are veteran members, who are always stuck with
an important guy in the caucus, right?
An important guy in the caucus, a guy who is well listened to, a guy who's considered very smart, and a guy who's considered not to say boo until he's ready to go. He's not considered, like some of these guys, to be a headline grabber or a guy who can be easily startled. He's a long-timer, let's wait it outer, who's finally decided it's time to speak in public. That bespeaks a certain frustration in the leadership. But their problem is that they commissioned a poll right before August 11th, the deadline for Bill DeWeese to not run as a candidate for re-election, which many thought would solve the whole problem. And the problem is the poll didn't come back the way they thought it was. The first finding they liked. If you ask people just straight up, do you think Bill DeWeese should win re-election, only 36% for a 30-year incumbent said yes. Then, because DeWeese, they wanted the poll to convince DeWeese, they said, what if we tell you all these terrible things about his opponent, former minor league football player Greg Hopkins, and all these good things about DeWeese? Then it went up to 48%. Mm-hmm. At 48%, you're in with the chance, and then Hopkins made a key mistake.
So what you're suggesting is that DeWeese could be helped by a poll that showed he could actually win his House seat,
which get to 48%.
Which some thought he was in jeopardy of losing. So the question then is not just would Bill DeWeese remain as majority leader, but would he be able to retain his seat in the legislature, right?
Right. There are a bunch of people who are saying, look, well, let's just stay as leader, but don't run for re-election, so we can say you're not running for re-election, and we can move on with our lives. That way you don't have the embarrassment of having to step down as majority leader, but we can say that your situation is dealt with because you're not running for re-election. Mm-hmm. Very similar to the way that Vince Fumo retained power.
Right.
And then
Senator Fumo from Philadelphia, who's under indictment. Go ahead.
But again, just to give you an idea, the Democrats were shocked that when you threw everything into the poll, all the positives for DeWeese, he got up to 48. Yeah. The Republicans tried to do the same thing for Bob Regola out in Westmoreland County, who was facing charges that he didn't store a gun properly and then lied about it to police. He was acquitted of the charges.
Right.
But in their poll, they couldn't get him above 40% for love or money, so he stepped
out.
And DeWeese had the opposite effect. Yeah. And then his opponent made a key mistake, which is that in that area, the only Republican statewide candidate who's been elected in the last 8 years is Arlen Specter. And Hopkins came out and said, I'm not a Specter Republican, I'm the other kind. I'm a conservative, the ones who keep losing that district.
Oh, you mean like Senator Santorum?
And George Bush. And Mike Fisher and Tom Corbett.
Yeah, believe it or not, we're almost out of time. But I have what's your best guess? Are we now going to see a cascading effect where one person after another comes out and asking Bill DeWeese? We're now up to 11 is my
13.
count. We're at 13. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Do you think this continues?
Yes. I think it continues, and I think we had a crescendo the third week in September 15th, when the House Democrats come back to session.
Pete gets the last word. We'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, stay well.